Why would Lot's daughters commit such a shocking act with their own father? This isn't just one of the Bible's most controversial moments. It's a story that challenges everything we think we know about fear, culture, and human choices. Could desperation and Sodom's influence have warped their judgment so deeply? Or is there an even greater lesson hidden in this unsettling tale? This isn't just ancient history, it's a mirror for our own lives. What led to this act? How did it shape their legacy? And what does it reveal about the impact of fear and environment on our decisions? Let's uncover the full story of Lot and the lessons it holds for us today. Lot's decision to settle in Sodom might have seemed brilliant at first glance. The valley was lush, perfect for his livestock and promised material success, but the glitter of prosperity often blinds us to hidden dangers. Sodom wasn't just a city, it was a moral abyss. Lot's choice to live there wasn't just about land, it was about exposing himself and his family to spiritual poison. How often do we, like Lot, ignore the warnings in pursuit of something that seems too good to pass up? Picture this. You're offered a high-paying job in a city with a questionable reputation. It feels like a golden opportunity, right? But what if the culture of that place begins to shift your values or the values of those closest to you? Lot thought he could handle the pressures of Sodom, but even he couldn't shield his daughters from its influence. It's a warning to us all. Every choice carries unseen costs. The Bible doesn't paint Lot as a reckless man. He wasn't out to make bad decisions, but his focus was short-sighted, centered on immediate gains rather than long-term spiritual health. It's a trap many fall into. A person might justify working endless hours for a better future, only to miss their children's formative years. Lot's mistake wasn't just a Bible story, it's a mirror reflecting our own compromises. Think about this. What's the real price of your choices? Lot's wealth grew in Sodom, but at what cost? His wife's heart turned to the city's idols, his daughters absorbed its moral decay, and he himself became entangled in its chaos. It's easy to see the potential benefits of a decision, but harder to recognize its dangers. That's why wisdom is essential, not just earthly wisdom, but spiritual discernment. Lot's journey into Sodom teaches us a powerful lesson. Convenience and comfort are often disguised traps. The fertile land looked like paradise, but Sodom's influence was a silent predator, creeping into his family's values. This is why every decision, no matter how small, must be weighed against its spiritual implications. Are you building a life on solid ground, or are you setting up camp near disaster? If we're honest, most of us have faced Sodom moments. A deal too good to refuse, a relationship that seems harmless but pulls us away from God, or a lifestyle that promises happiness but leaves us empty. Lot's story isn't just ancient history. It's a living reminder that what we choose today shapes tomorrow. The question is, are we making choices that honor God, or ones that expose us to unnecessary risks? The ripple effects of Lot's decision are staggering. His daughters, raised in Sodom's culture, would later make devastating choices of their own. This wasn't just about Lot's life. It was about the legacy he left behind. It's a sobering thought. Our decisions don't just impact us. They shape the lives of those who look up to us, parents, leaders, and mentors. What kind of example are we setting? Lot's story doesn't end in Sodom, though. As the city crumbled, he fled to the mountains, a place of refuge but also isolation. It's a stark contrast, from the hustle of Sodom to the solitude of a cave. What did Lot learn in those mountains? What happens when the noise of the world fades and we're left to face the aftermath of our choices? That's where the next part of his story begins. When Lot fled to the mountains, it wasn't just a physical escape. It was a journey into isolation and reflection. Imagine leaving behind everything you've built, watching it crumble in the rearview mirror. The cave became their refuge, but it also symbolized a deep emotional and spiritual exile. Lot's daughters, once surrounded by the vibrant chaos of Sodom, now faced the eerie silence of the wilderness. The shift was jarring, and with silence often comes unsettling thoughts. Think about it. How do we react when the noise of life stops? For Lot and his daughters, the mountains weren't just a place of safety, they were a mirror reflecting their fears and regrets. It's easy to underestimate the emotional toll of sudden isolation. Today, we might experience it as losing a job, moving to an unfamiliar city, or even disconnecting from toxic relationships. The mountains test us, stripping away distractions and leaving only raw truth. The cave wasn't just a hiding place. It became a crucible where the remnants of Sodom's influence clashed with survival instincts. Lot's daughters, raised in a city of moral decay, carried those scars with them. Isolation magnifies inner battles, and for them, it distorted their reasoning. It's a sobering reminder that even when we leave a toxic environment, its residue often lingers. Healing isn't automatic. It requires intentional effort and time. Consider this: when you're forced to step away from the chaos of life, how do you use that time? The mountains could have been a place for Lot's family to rebuild their faith and reset their values. Instead, fear took the wheel. Fear of extinction, fear of an uncertain future. And isn't that a familiar feeling? We all face moments where uncertainty drives us to rash decisions. The question is, will we act in faith or fear? Lot's daughters let their fear override their trust in God. In the stillness of the cave, they devised a plan that was both desperate and morally questionable. This wasn't a sudden shift. It was the culmination of years immersed in Sodom's culture. It shows us how vital it is to protect our hearts and minds from corrupting influences. What we absorb today shapes how we respond tomorrow. The mountains also symbolize a space where God's grace could have worked profoundly. Lot's family had witnessed divine judgment firsthand: fire from heaven, the city's destruction, even the loss of Lot's wife. Yet instead of seeking God's guidance in their isolation, they relied on their flawed human understanding. It's a stark reminder that even in our darkest places, we're never beyond the reach of divine wisdom if we seek it. For modern readers, the cave is a metaphor for those seasons of life where everything feels stripped away. Maybe it's a health crisis, a financial collapse, or a broken relationship. These cave moments test our character. Will we grow bitter and fearful, or will we use the silence to draw closer to God? Lot's daughters' choices teach us that survival isn't just about preserving life, it's about preserving values. The isolation of the mountains sets the stage for what happens next, a controversial act born out of fear and desperation. Lot's daughters believed they were securing their family's future, but their decisions would have far-reaching consequences. This moment, dark and troubling, forces us to wrestle with the question: when fear drives our actions, what kind of legacy are we leaving behind? The answers unfold in the next chapter. In the eerie silence of the cave, Lot's daughters made a choice that would echo through history. Fearful that their family line would end, they turned to a desperate solution, laying down with their own father. This wasn't just a scandalous act. It was a reflection of Sodom's lingering influence on their thinking. The moral decay they had grown up with shaped their perspective, proving that even when we leave a place of corruption, its shadows can follow us. Let's pause and consider the weight of their decision. Imagine the fear that drove them. A future without descendants, a name wiped from history. It's the same fear many people feel today when facing an uncertain tomorrow. But fear has a way of distorting reality, pushing us to justify actions we'd never consider in calmer moments. Lot's daughters didn't act out of malice. They acted out of desperation. And desperation, unchecked, can lead to devastating choices. Their decision highlights a profound truth. The culture we're immersed in shapes how we respond to crisis. Raised in Sodom, the daughters didn't see their plan as outrageous. It felt logical to them. This is why what we consume daily, be it media, relationships, or ideas, matters deeply. If we allow toxic influences to dominate, they can warp our values and judgments, especially when life's pressures mount. This isn't just an ancient story, it's a warning. How often do people today compromise their values under the weight of fear? Whether it's cutting ethical corners in business, rushing into relationships for security, or making decisions based solely on anxiety, the lesson is clear. Fear-based choices rarely end well. Lot's daughters believed they were preserving their family, but they were creating a legacy of conflict and division. From their union came Moab and Ben-Ami, the ancestors of the Moabites and Ammonites, nations that later became adversaries of Israel. It's a sobering reminder that our choices don't just affect us, they ripple into the lives of others, sometimes for generations. What kind of legacy are we leaving with our decisions? Are we planting seeds of peace and faith, or division and regret? Lot's daughters acted in secret, believing they were solving a problem. But their story reminds us that no act is truly hidden from God. When fear whispers, "You're alone and you must act now," faith answers, "You're never alone and God will make a way." If only they had sought divine guidance in that cave, their story might have taken a different turn. But instead, they relied on their own understanding, and the results were tragic. The controversial union forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature. It shows how fear, isolation, and cultural influences can drive even well-meaning people to make devastating choices. But it also reminds us that God's story doesn't end with our failures. Even in the midst of brokenness, His plan unfolds. The line of Moab, though born of sin, would one day produce Ruth, a woman of extraordinary faith. This moment in Lot's story leaves us with a haunting question. When faced with fear and uncertainty, do we lean on God or our own flawed reasoning? The decisions made in that cave set the stage for a history marked by conflict, but also glimpses of redemption. And as the story continues, the divine judgment on Sodom becomes even clearer, a stark reminder of God's justice and mercy. The destruction of Sodom wasn't just a catastrophic event. It was a statement, a declaration of God's justice against unchecked wickedness. The city had become a symbol of moral decay, where sin was celebrated and righteousness ridiculed. But divine patience has limits, and when the cries of injustice reached heaven, God acted. This moment wasn't just about judgment, it was also about mercy, as He gave Lot and his family a chance to escape. It's a striking balance, justice delivered, but grace extended. Imagine standing on a hill, watching fire rain down from the heavens, engulfing the place you once called home. For Lot and his daughters, the sight must have been both terrifying and humbling. They weren't spared because they were perfect, they were spared because of God's mercy. This is a powerful reminder that salvation isn't earned by our deeds, but by divine grace. It's a humbling truth that calls us to reflect on our own lives. God's judgment on Sodom also serves as a warning. It's a reminder that sin has consequences, not just for individuals, but for entire communities. The Bible doesn't shy away from showing the ripple effects of collective corruption. Today, we might see parallels in societies where greed, violence, and injustice dominate. But just as God judged Sodom, He also offers hope and a way out for those willing to turn to Him. One of the most striking aspects of this story is Abraham's intercession. Before the destruction, he pleaded with God, asking if the city could be spared for the sake of a few righteous people. This wasn't just an act of compassion, it was a demonstration of faith. Abraham believed in God's justice and mercy, trusting that He would act rightly. How often do we intercede for others, trusting God to work in situations that seem beyond hope? The fire that consumed Sodom wasn't just physical, it was symbolic of a deeper truth. Sin consumes, leaving devastation in its wake. But just as fire purifies, divine judgment also has a refining purpose. It forces us to confront the reality of our choices and the condition of our hearts. For Lot's family, the destruction of Sodom was a turning point, a moment to leave the past behind and step into a new chapter. The tragedy of Sodom also reveals the danger of looking back. Lot's wife, unable to let go of her attachments, turned into a pillar of salt. It's a vivid reminder that clinging to what God has called us to leave behind can paralyze us. Her story asks us, what are we holding on to that keeps us from moving forward? Are we fixated on the past when God is calling us to something greater? Even amid judgment, there's a thread of redemption. Lot's escape symbolizes the opportunity for a fresh start, but it also highlights the weight of obedience. God's instructions were clear: don't look back. And isn't that often the hardest part? Whether it's leaving a toxic relationship, a harmful habit, or a sinful mindset, moving forward requires trust. Trust that what's ahead is better than what's behind. The destruction of Sodom sets the stage for what comes next. It's a stark reminder of God's justice, but also his relentless mercy. Lot and his daughters may have escaped the fire, but the challenges weren't over. The mountains awaited, a place of refuge, but also reckoning. What lessons would they carry from the ashes of Sodom into the solitude of the wilderness? The story continues. Abraham's intercession for Sodom is one of the most profound moments in the Bible, showcasing the power of faith and compassion. When he pleaded with God to spare the city if even a few righteous people were found, he wasn't just bargaining, he was demonstrating trust in God's justice and mercy. It's a vivid reminder that prayer isn't about changing God's mind, it's about aligning our hearts with his will. Abraham's boldness teaches us that we can approach God with confidence, knowing he hears us. Picture this: Abraham standing under the vast desert sky, speaking directly to God with a mixture of humility and boldness. What if there are 50 righteous people? What if there are just 10? Each question reveals a heart deeply invested in others' well-being. This isn't just a story. It's a model for how we should pray, not only for ourselves, but for those around us, even those we might struggle to love. Abraham's prayer wasn't answered in the way he might have hoped. Sodom was still destroyed, but his intercession wasn't in vain. Lot and his family were spared, showing that God's mercy extends even in judgment. This teaches us that while our prayers may not always result in the outcomes we desire, they are never wasted. God's plans are bigger than our understanding, but he invites us to be part of them through prayer. Intercession isn't just about asking for blessings or protection. It's about standing in the gap for others. Think about someone in your life who might be walking a dangerous path. Abraham's story challenges us to pray for them with the same passion and persistence he showed for Sodom. Prayer isn't a passive act. It's an active partnership with God to bring about change, even in situations that seem hopeless. The dialogue between Abraham and God reveals something incredible, a relationship built on trust and intimacy. Abraham wasn't afraid to ask tough questions or express his concerns. How often do we hesitate to bring our deepest fears and questions to God? This moment shows us that he welcomes honesty. God doesn't dismiss Abraham's questions. Instead, he engages with them, showing that faith thrives in open communication. Abraham's intercession also highlights the ripple effect of righteousness. His prayers weren't just for his own benefit. They were an act of love for an entire city. It's a call to think beyond ourselves, to lift up our communities, our nations, and even those who oppose us. The world might dismiss prayer as powerless, but Abraham's story shows that it can move heaven and earth. Even in judgment, God's mercy shines through. Lot's rescue was a direct result of Abraham's prayerful intercession, proving that God values the prayers of the faithful. This truth is both comforting and challenging. Comforting because it shows the power of prayer, and challenging because it calls us to take that responsibility seriously. Who are you praying for today, and how might your prayers shape their lives? As the story shifts back to Lot's escape, we're left with a powerful image. Abraham watching from a distance, knowing he did all he could through prayer. It's a reminder that our role isn't to control outcomes, but to faithfully intercede. What lessons did Abraham take from this moment? And how does his faith continue to influence the unfolding story of Lot and his daughters? The journey doesn't end here. The story of Lot and his daughters isn't just a tale of ancient times, it's a wake-up call for us today. It challenges us to reflect on the choices we make, the environments we immerse ourselves in, and the legacy we're building. What fears or influences might be shaping your decisions right now? Are they aligned with faith, or are they pulling you away from God's purpose? These questions aren't just for reflection, they're a call to action. Now it's your turn. Look at the areas in your life where fear or comfort might be clouding your judgment. What steps can you take today to break free from unhealthy patterns? Start small, evaluate your surroundings, prioritize what strengthens your values, and lean into faith when facing uncertainty. Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this story speaks to you personally. If this video has inspired you to dig deeper into these lessons, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There's so much more to uncover about the Bible's wisdom and how it applies to your life. Together, let's keep growing, learning, and walking in faith.